Hello, fellow coffee consumers and crime connoisseurs. Welcome to the 21st episode of Mugshot Mornings, where we explore true crime one sip at a time. Before I get into the video, today's case is going to be a tough one to listen to. This case is going to be one that's pretty tough to hear and one that is tough to talk about, but it needs to be told. The story needs some coverage. It has zero coverage here on YouTube. I don't know of any podcast that have covered this case either. I do want to thank the channel Legitimately Criminal for suggesting this case because, you know, this case does need to be talked about. It needs to be heard. There's not a lot of coverage on this case, and I'm grateful that you suggested this case because it does need to be talked about. So we're just going to do quick updates along with our coffee talk, what we're sipping on, and then get into today's story. Alright, so we did our intro. I'm trying to think about changing this because I accidentally made the shelves too high, so we'll fix it one day, but not today. I think maybe in the new year I will change it. Maybe move over to this corner. That's what I'm thinking. So today, what are we sipping on? For those of you who don't know, and this is your first video, my name is Sydney. I am the host of this podcast. It's just me. I do all of the editing. I do all of the research, the filming, everything like that. And I incorporate true crime and coffee. And we talk about coffee before we get into the story, what we're sipping on, what we're brewing. So I made my coffee today. I didn't go to Scooters. I didn't go to 7 Brew. I didn't go to my usual spots. But I made a iced white chocolate latte with oat milk. And it's 3 out of 10. I'm not proud of it. I wish that y'all could have been with me when I went to Black Rifle Company in Tennessee this weekend. That is some of the best coffee I think I've ever had in my life. Up there with Emma Chamberlain's, Chamberlain coffee. I think that is some of the best coffee ever. It was so good. It was my favorite iced latte I've ever had in my life. It was so good. So yeah, that is what we're sipping on today. I don't really have any updates. I went to Tennessee this weekend. Just a reminder, I'm not going to be posting next week because of the holidays. You know what? We're just going to get into today's story because it's not going to be a super long one because like I said, there's not a lot of media coverage on this case. I had to buy a subscription just so I could read most of the articles on this case. And that's not bad. I'm just saying, there's no videos covering this little boy's case, no podcasts, and if there is, and I just don't know about it, I couldn't find any, and I think that I got a good one. I have about 10 pages here, so we're just going to get into today's story. On January 14th, 2010, in Roanoke, Virginia, the Roanoke Police Department received a call from someone reporting an abduction. The child was 2-year-old Aveion Malik Lewis from 2100 block of King Charles Avenue. The person that called to report this missing toddler was Brandon Lockett, Aveion's stepfather. He told police that 3 men had invaded his home, and they were all masked. They hit him over the head, which knocked him unconscious, and then they took 2-year-old Aveion Lewis. A statewide Amber Alert was issued, and this toddler became Virginia's #1 priority within minutes. The Amber Alert issued that he was a male toddler, approximately 2 years old, 26 pounds, with close-cut black hair and brown eyes, and he was last seen wearing SpongeBob SquarePants pajamas. Brandon told police that these men demanded $10,000. He stated, "I opened up the door, I just felt bam.
I heard a knock at the door. I went to the back door, and all I remember was boom. That's all I remember. When I came to, my wife was standing over me, and my son was, he was crying. And my daughter, she was gagged upstairs in her room, and that's all I remember.
And what about the people?
I seen some guys earlier that morning, but as far as right then when it happened, I don't recall no faces. I just remember black and seen just black. That's all I remember, but I remember some guys I had seen earlier that morning on the side of my house, and also I seen some guys over here in Food Line parking lot. They were standing right out here in Food Line's parking lot, and I remember those guys, but other than that, I don't recall anything else. I just want everything to be okay. I hope he's all right. That's all I hope, because he can't hold his own body temperature. He has a lot of medical problems.
Like what?
He has malrotation, meaning he can eat, eat, but his body won't absorb the fats that it needs to. It don't have the enzymes that it needs. So, I mean, he has medical problems. I mean, if you got him, make sure you keep him warm.
He said when he came to and he woke up, Aveion was missing. There were 3 other children in the home, though. The daughter was lying face down, her hands were behind her back, and she was gagged. A ransom note was left stating that they wanted $10,000, and it was nothing personal, just business. They allegedly drove an older white SUV, known possibly to be a 1990 Chevy Trailblazer. The 3 men were described as one being a 6'2" black male in his late 20s with a stocky build and a beard, a 5'11" black male with dreadlocks in his late 20s, muscular upper body, and a 5'11" black male, mid-20s, with no facial hair. They were spotted before the abduction hanging around outside of the home, and Brandon had asked these males several times to leave the residence and get off of his property. Brandon told police that if this was about money, he had the money and he would give it to them if it meant that Aveion was brought home safely. Aveion's uncle, Chris Ward, who was his mother's brother, said that he was really skeptical of this story and that it didn't make any sense. He stated, "I find it hard to believe that they tied my niece up, took my nephew, and still had time to sit down and write a note with 2 different handwritings and get out with nobody seeing them." At first, Brandon said that the note was addressed to someone not living in their home, and he would not disclose who it was for. He stated that the abductors used his family to get someone he knew, and this person was Chris Ward, the uncle. Regarding Aveion's mother, Morgan Lockett, she was at work at the time this abduction took place. She said that she had walked in, saw that her house was ransacked, and her husband was lying on the floor unconscious. She stated that Aveion was born prematurely and he had digestive problems. As a result, he didn't have enough fat on his body to keep him warm, so if he was not properly taken care of, his body temperature would drop quickly, and he could be in very grave danger. She explained that she wanted her son back, and she was still hopeful the abductors would do the right thing. Aveion's birthday was January 26th, and they still planned to celebrate his 3rd birthday at Chuck E. Cheese. They asserted that they knew that God would keep him safe and he would be brought home right before his 3rd birthday. Police searched the area surrounding Aveion's home and even confiscated surveillance video footage from nearby businesses, hoping to possibly catch the 3 men or the white SUV. They searched the neighborhood with canines and even had a helicopter with infrared cameras to detect body heat over the wooded areas. They were determined to find this little boy as he was taken in such a scary way, and time was only running out. The FBI even got involved. They showed a picture of Aveion on electronic billboards all across the state and featured him on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Police opened a command center in downtown Roanoke for 24 hours to take tips and review information regarding his kidnapping. Of course, many people questioned this story as well. People were wondering that if Brandon was hit, did he have any cuts or bruises or markings or any type of injuries at all indicating that this was true? Brandon was spotted with a split lip and he did have bruises on his face, similar to what he would look like after an attack. Now, I may be butchering this guy's name. I couldn't find the way you pronounce his last name, so I'm just going to try my best. It's spelled Lucich, so I'm going to say it's Lucich. So John Lucich was the criminal investigator on Aveion's case. He noted that many abductors come with the ransom note in hand to the crime. They are trying to get in and out as quickly as possible. So he agreed that this was weird and it was a suspicious clue. The ransom note was written on the back of a hospital bill inside of the victim's home. So he believed that it was weird that they wrote a note while they were there. He specifically stated, quote, "Most cases that I've seen, they go there to the scene of the crime with the note already done. They're not going to waste any time. If they're going to come in, grab that kid, and try and get out, they're not going to take time to sit down, look for a piece of paper, find a pen, and actually sit there and write that. That is the biggest suspicious part of the whole case right there." There are a lot of suspicions raised also about the fact that only 1 of 4 children were taken in the home, and 2 of them were completely unharmed. 1 of them was gagged. It was just weird. They would either take all of the children or take 1, tie up the rest. It was just really suspicious, and many people questioned if the family was even involved. Judge David Young was quoted saying that he thought it was someone related to the situation. He brought up that no one had heard from Avein's biological father and what was his role. Maybe he wanted Avein back, and they needed to look into the relationship between Morgan and his biological father, whose name is James. There were also notes about Brandon's demeanor and body language, describing him as flat, not panicked, and his statement seemed rehearsed. There were so many questions, and this case was just not sitting right with the public or the police. Before we continue, there were a lot of questions being raised at this time. Why would 3 men target a lower income family and attack in the middle of the day? Not at night, not in the early hours of the morning, around 6 p.m. Why did they only take 1 of 4 children in the home? Did they, and why did they, write a note in the middle of the abduction? Was Avein's biological father involved, and if so, why? What did these men want with a 2-year-old toddler? Unfortunately, after being hounded by police for several days, on January 19th, only 5 days after the alleged abduction, police make a statement that they believe Aveion is deceased. Brandon Lockett, Avein's stepfather, confessed that the boy had already been dead, and the kidnapping story was a lie. Aveion was even dead before Brandon called 911 to report the abduction. What went from searching to find an abducted little boy possibly still alive went quickly to finding a 2-year-old's deceased body. Police had Brandon in custody, but they had not charged him with anything as they did not have Aveion's body or cause of death. Police did take Morgan into questioning, but they did not charge her with anything. She was just being questioned and interrogated. Shortly after, on January 27th, 2010, only 1 day after Aveion's 3rd birthday, Aveion Malik Lewis's lifeless body was found wrapped in packaging and tape in the Smith Gap landfill. Brandon was quickly charged with felony child neglect, improper disposal of a human body, and obstruction of justice. There was not a quick understanding of the cause of death, but after the investigators looked over Aveion's bodily injuries, they quickly noted that it is very possible that he had been abused, leading to his death. Aveion was found with a scar from a cigarette that seemed as if someone had put it out on his body, second-degree burns on the back of his legs and rear, an untreated fractured and broken arm, and a loss of weight that was so extreme that the medical examiner said that it could have been fatal. On February 28, 2010, both Morgan and Brandon Lockett were indicted for charges of murder and child abuse. The indictment showed that Morgan was involved in Aveion's death in some way because she surrendered to the Roanoke police. The indictment stated that she caused or allowed Aveion to be tortured, tormented, mutilated, beaten, or cruelly treated, and she failed to provide the necessary care for her child's health. Sorry, 1 second. Morgan's family did quickly come to defend her. Her sister Kara said that there were 3 other children who were very happy and healthy. She stated if there was any abuse to Aveion, Morgan did not know about it. Earlier I mentioned that Morgan told police that Aveion was born with a medical problem because of him being born prematurely, but by the time that Aveion was 14 months old, he was reported to allegedly only weigh 9 pounds. And for most of you who don't know this, that is only 1 pound heavier than the average weight of an infant who is just born. So this 14-month-old weighed the same as a baby that is 1 day old. It was brought to light that in May 2008, when Aveion was 14 months old, He was placed in foster care because someone reported him to social services for being severely underweight and neglected. While he was with his foster parents, he gained a healthy weight, around 20 pounds, in 11 months. He was only back with Morgan and Brandon for 4 months before he went missing and was supposedly abducted. For Morgan and Brandon to get their son back, they were required to take parenting classes along with 20 to 30 hours per month working with a social worker. On March 1st, 2010, both Morgan and Brandon were arraigned on murder, child neglect, and child cruelty charges. They were held in jail without bail. Brandon had an appointed attorney to defend him, while Morgan declined an appointed attorney. She told the judge that her family was raising money to hire a well-known attorney named Richard Lawrence. However, because of her charges, Richard Lawrence declined and said that he would not represent her. So the judge, Clifford Weckstein, told Morgan that she had a week to find an attorney, or one would be appointed to represent her. She did ultimately have to get a court-appointed attorney. Her lawyer stated that she was so abused by her husband that she may not have been able to form the intent to kill her own son that the law says is necessary to sustain the murder charge. One of her attorneys requested for a psychologist to evaluate her, but this request was later denied. They didn't elaborate on how Brandon was abusive. They only stated that he controlled every single aspect of their lives. Leading up to their trials, a new witness was added, 33-year-old Dorniki Renee Turner. She confirmed that she was in the location of the crime on and or around the time of the incident. She called police on January 18th, 2010, so this was 4 days after the alleged abduction and 1 day before Brandon admitted the story that he created was false. She told police specific places to search and what evidence to find. She knew details of the case that had not been released to the public yet. She may have been involved in the crime, but she was ultimately not charged. And I know that this kind of ends here, but I could not find anything further regarding this witness. So there's nothing more to this, but maybe she helped and maybe they kind of gave her immunity if she gave some information. I don't know. Couldn't find it. Brandon, only 2 weeks before his trial was supposed to happen, tried to fire his attorneys and he requested new lawyers, but the judge denied this. The judge also denied that his attorneys could be allowed to quit. So basically they all had to work together and just kind of deal with it until the trial was over. The judge also turned down the defense's request to throw out prosecution evidence. Apparently Brandon and his appointed attorneys spoke in court that they were just not getting along. They had a lot of friction, and his appointed lawyer, Rachel Jackson, and co-counsel admitted that there were disagreements and it had become a situation where they were in an adversarial relationship. The judge basically told Brandon to suck it up and respect his attorneys because he's going to have to deal with them in 2 weeks. Now, before Brandon could go to trial, he did ultimately plead no contest to second-degree murder and child abuse and neglect charges. He initially faced first-degree murder charges if he did go to trial the following week, but prosecutors dismissed the charge as part of his plea agreement. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison, 40 for the murder, and 10 years for abuse and neglect, both the maximum penalty for the charges. His guilty verdict, even though he pled no contest, I hate that people can do that, by the way. I think that's very dumb. Whatever. His guilty verdict was ultimately due to the state that Aveion's body was in once he was medically examined. Now, this next part is going to be really rough. I cried when I researched it. I just want to prepare you, just in case I do get choked up. Aveion's body had no fat whatsoever. No food in his body that even showed he was digesting something. He weighed less than 20 pounds, and his weight loss was sufficient enough to cause death. Other bodily injuries included a broken arm that was untreated for around 1 month, untreated second-degree burns on his legs, bruises all over his body that appeared from being grabbed, a circular burn on his hand similar to the size of a cigarette, and cuts that should have been treated with stitches but were not. The father of Aveion's babysitter stated that she said there was untreated burns on his legs that looked like Freddy Krueger. Additionally, he slept on a mattress with no pillows, blankets, or sheets that was bloodstained and soaked in urine. Investigators also discovered a practice ransom note under the sofa at the Locketts' residence. Morgan did not take a plea arrangement and went to trial. Apparently, there were 12,000 pages of evidence, and they were trying to get her to take the plea, but she insisted that she would be found not guilty in the trial. The prosecution attorney, Sandra Workman, started off the trial by describing Morgan as a mother who once told Aveion's biological father that their son cried a lot just to get on her nerves. She told Brandon to punish Aveion with a belt for soiling a diaper. She told the jury that evidence would show that Aveion lived a happy and fulfilled life while under the care from others, but once back in the care of his own mother, he was starved, beaten, tortured, and ultimately killed, all caused by his mother. Morgan's attorney painted her in a different light, saying that once Aveion was taken from her, she did everything she could to get him back, including attending the hearings and undergoing all medical examinations necessary. He told the jury that the entire plan was made up by Brandon, unbeknownst to Morgan, who was just at work and came home to her son missing. He continued by saying that there had not been a cause of death, and his body's injuries should not be used to determine his cause of death. The trial was filled with many, many tears. Witnesses explained the state of Aveion's bedroom, including the mattress mentioned before, but FBI analyst Gren testified that there was an overpowering smell of urine and that their feet had stuck to the floor. There were additional red stains on the floor beside a toy police car. Morgan also told police she was unaware of his arm being broken. She stated that she knew he had hurt his arm before after he fell off a swing set, but he cried and he just didn't use it for a couple of days. An investigator explained that Aveion's arm was broken mid-shaft, a spiral fracture, which indicated abuse, and not because of a fall. Detective Willoughby also recalled that whenever he went to the residence after Aveion was allegedly abducted, Morgan was not emotional at all. A case manager for Child Health Investment Partnership, a healthcare provider for low-income families, testified that she notified social services after being very disturbed by her visits to the Lockett home. She stated that Morgan was very affectionate and loving with her daughter, but she did not ever bond with Aveion. The first year of Aveion's life, from 2007 to 2008, she did not take him to any doctor's appointments. She would also leave him in a baby seat that didn't allow his feet to touch the ground for extended periods of times, and she would put water or applesauce, or combine both, in a bottle instead of formula to give him. Aveion, 14 months at the time he was brought into the foster care system, could not even sit up on his own, and his head was abnormally larger than the rest of his body. His foster parents testified that he wouldn't even cry and he didn't like to be touched. He just kind of whimpered. They testified that only after a few weeks, Aveion had gained some weight, was able to sit up, crawl, and even walk on his own. He went from being a very lethargic kid to energetic and outgoing, even saying hello to strangers. However, in the trial, the judge cited that a medical opinion based on probability is purely speculation, meaning that it was really unfair for the jury to return with a guilty verdict of first-degree murder without the fact of what killed Aveion. Still, at the time of her trial, there was no cause of death but only the condition of his body. The judge had switched her charge from first-degree murder, meaning she could have faced the possibility of life imprisonment, to second-degree murder, where the max penalty is 40 years. Because of this, the trial concluded and Morgan pled no contest to second-degree murder and felony child abuse. Originally, the trial was set to last for about 2 weeks, but she pled no contest on the 6th day, meaning the trial ultimately ended. Now, at the same time that this is going on, Brandon comes back with a letter saying that he is innocent and he wants to withdraw his no contest plea and he demanded a trial. He said that he pled no contest 6 weeks prior because he thought a murder charge against his wife would be dropped. But since she pled no contest and even went to trial, he was innocent. He said he felt pressured by his attorneys to make a plea arrangement, and he no longer wanted them to represent him if he was able to have a trial. He was going to represent himself. He changed his story and said that his stepson had choked while eating a honey bun, and his body was disposed of by a friend he only knew as Jose. He asserted, quote, "I'm now going to stand up for my innocence, because I did not murder or cause the death of Aveion Lewis. However, the judge dismissed the motion for him to withdraw his plea, stating that he would not be allowed a trial and he had to keep his original plea. Now, going back to Morgan, again, she pled no contest and took her plea mid-trial. It was said that it was the judge's ruling to change the charges, but one of her attorneys said that Morgan asked for it to end because she didn't want to go any further. She ultimately was sentenced to 40 years for the death of her 2-year-old son, 30 years for second-degree murder, and 10 years for the child abuse charges. She did not receive the full maximum penalty for second-degree murder, which was 40 years. So originally she was facing up to 50 years, but don't know why they gave her the 10 years less. After both Morgan and Brandon pled no contest to their second-degree murder and child abuse and neglect charges, Avein's biological father, James Lewis, spoke out. He stated that he was shut out of his son's life from very early on. Avein's second father, his name is Jeff Yopp, he was the foster parent to Aveion for almost 1 year. Both men attended the courtroom proceedings and sentencing. James, his biological father, spoke that he named him after Aveion Kaysen, who was a former Detroit Lions running back. It came out in court that Morgan hated her son's name and found him sickly and difficult to deal with. Morgan and James were high school sweethearts, but their relationship ended after James had cheated on her. He stated that he had limited contact with Aveion after the two separated due to her new relationship with Brandon. Brandon and Morgan had originally met on an online dating app, and she was unaware that Brandon was originally from Georgia, and he had been convicted of drug and assault charges on a previous ex-girlfriend. James and Brandon did not get along. James stated, "I went to Aveion's first birthday, and she wouldn't even open the door. She told me to come back the next day. She wouldn't open the door for my mother either. I couldn't go down there because every time I did, there was a problem. It was never cool with him." The day that Aveion was found, James was in court being granted sole custody of their first daughter. This was the daughter that was found bound and tied up in Brandon's kidnapping hoax. Jeff, Aveion's foster father, explained that in May 2008, he and his wife received a call that a child needed a home. This child was Aveion Lewis. He explained that the first emotion that he felt was fear. He stated, "He scared me. He was literally a 15-month-old newborn. His little legs were as big as my finger." He stated that he and his wife took Aveion to the beach, took many photos of him, and loved him like he was their own. After Morgan and Brandon were gained custody of him again, Jeff indicated that he called numerous times to get feedback on how he was doing, but they only said he was fine. They wouldn't elaborate on his life any further. So because neither Morgan or Brandon went to trial, technically Morgan did, but it didn't end the way that many people wanted, I think the no contest plea doesn't really fully serve justice for the other family members. I hate the no contest plea because it's just like an opt-out, like a cop-out. It's cowardly and it's bullshit. Nobody really knows what happened to him. I mean, we have this story of what happened to Aveion, but there was never ultimately a autopsy done and a cause of death. I don't know why. Obviously, abuse and neglect. He was way too tiny. I also read that Morgan thought that her child was too fat when he came back from his foster family. Did she not understand that he was severely underweight? Like, he's actually at a healthy weight now. You're just not used to it because you're not feeding your fucking kid. Before I continue my tangent, let me go back and explain how Aveion touched many lives. Aveion was described by his family, his foster parents, and those close to him in his very short life as very easy to love. They talked about his laugh, his smile, and his love for raisins. Aveion's life was taken far, far too soon, and the acts of Brandon and Morgan Lockett are absolutely deplorable. I don't even know, where to begin. I work with children, okay? And I work with low-income children. I work with minorities. The majority of my population are minorities, and whether they are African American, whether they're low income, I don't want children, and it's not because I have this weird hatred for children. I work with them. I'm also a mandated reporter at my job, and I feel that the foster system and the child protective services system and child health, and they failed this boy. They saw the signs. They saw that he was being targeted out of all of the other children for some reason. Maybe it's because he was the youngest. I don't know. All of the other children are happy, untouched, unharmed, healthy physically. What was Aveion? Like, what was the reason for him to be so malnourished and so mistreated? I don't understand. Like, he was being mistreated before he was even 2. It was just this long time of nobody caring for him except for the foster parents. This story was hard, and I know that it was probably hard to listen to. I don't even know how to just say my outro now. So I guess the main thing is anybody who works in the system, anybody who is a mandated reporter in any way, if you see there are signs, it is better to be wrong and say something to someone than to be right and not say something. This boy was failed. And my condolences and my apologies and my heart goes out to his family that is not Morgan and Brandon. I am so sorry you didn't get to see this boy grow up and live his life due to the neglect and abuse. You would have never known that was your family doing that, so I'm not blaming the family for not helping. That's not it at all. I don't even really want to say a happy outro. I don't want to just turn into that. That's not fair to the boy, the family, the story, anything like that. So thank you guys for listening so much. I appreciate y'all tuning in every single week. Thank you for the case suggestion again, Legitimately Criminal. If y'all have any case suggestions that y'all would like for me to cover, I have my email down below, or you can comment. I always read my comments. If you like stories like this, if you like this channel, please subscribe, tell your friends, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye.